This article covers the history of the Philippines from the creation of the Laguna Copperplate Inscription in 900 to the arrival of European explorer Ferdinand Magellan in 1521, which marks the beginning of the Spanish Colonial period. The Laguna Copperplate Inscription is the first written document found in a Philippine language. The inscription itself identifies the date of its creation as the year 900. Prior to its discovery in 1989, the earliest record of the Philippine Islands corresponded with the arrival of Ferdinand Magellan in 1521. The discovery of the LCI thus extended the record of Philippine history back by 600 years. After 900, the early history of territories and nation-states prior to being present-day Philippines is known through archaeological findings and records of contacts with other civilizations such as Song Dynasty China and the Bruneian Empire. The Laguna Copperplate Inscription and its context. In January 1990, the Laguna Copperplate, then just a thin piece of crumpled and blackened metal, was offered for sale to and was acquired by the National Museum of the Philippines after previous efforts to sell it to the world of antiques had been unsuccessful. On examination, it was found to measure about 20 centimeters square and to be fully covered on one side with an inscription in 10 lines of finely written characters. Antun Postma deciphered the text and discovered that it identified the date of its creation as the year of Saka 822, month of Vaisakha. Quote, according to Jyotisha, this corresponded with the year 900. Prior to the deciphering of the LCI, Philippine history was traditionally considered to begin at 1521, with the arrival of Magellan and his chronicler, Antonio Pigafetta. History could not be derived from pre-colonial records because such records typically did not survive. Most of the writing was done on perishable bamboo leaves. Furthermore, zealous Spanish Christian missionaries burnt whole libraries of documents considered pagan, because the deciphering of the LCI made it out to be the earliest written record of the islands that would later become the Philippines. The LCI reset the traditional boundaries between Philippine history and prehistory, placing the demarcation line at least 600 years earlier. The inscription forgives the descendants of Namwaran from a debt of 926.4 grams of gold, and is granted by the chief of Tondo and the authorities of Pala, Binawangan and Pulilan, which are all locations in Luzon. The words are a mixture of mostly Sanskrit along with some Old Malay, Old Javanese and Old Tagalog. The subject matter proves conclusively that a developed society with traders, rulers and international trading existed in the Philippines prior to the Spanish colonization. The references to the chief of Madang Kingdom in Indonesia imply that there were cultural and trade links with empires and territories in other parts of maritime Southeast Asia, particularly Srivijaya. The copperplate indicate the presence of writing and of written records at the time, and the earliest proof of Philippines language, barangay city-states and thalassocracy. Since at least the 3rd century, the indigenous peoples were in contact with other Southeast Asian and East Asian nations. Fragmented ethnic groups established several chiefdoms formed by the assimilation of several small political units known as barangay, each headed by a datu, who was then answerable to a raja who headed the city-estate. Each barangay consisted of about 100 families. Some barangays were big, such as Zubu, Butuan, Mactan, Irong, Bigan, and Salurong. Each of these big barangays had a population of more than 2,000. By the 14th century, there was a group of tribes organized through strict social classes. The Da were a ruling class, the Maharlika were noblemen, the Timoa were a freeman, and the dependent class, which is divided into two, the Alaping Namamahe and Alaping Sagigalit. In the earliest times, the items which were prized by the people included jars, which were a symbol of wealth throughout South Asia, and later metal, salt and tobacco. In exchange, the people would trade feathers, rhino horn, hornbill beaks, beeswax, birds' nests, resin and rattan. Chinese trade. The earliest date suggested for direct Chinese contact with the Philippines was 982. At the time, merchants from Ma'ai brought the wares to Guangzhou. This was noted by the Sungshi by Ma Tuanlin, who compiled it with other historical records in the Wenxian Tiong Kao at the time around the transition between the Sung and Yuan dynasties. The growth of Islamic sultanates. In 1380, Makdum Karim, the first Islamic missionary to the Philippines, brought Islam to the archipelago. Subsequent visits of Arab, Malay and Javanese missionaries helped strengthen the Islamic faith of the Filipinos, most of whom would later become Christian under the Spanish colonization. The Sultanate of Sulu, the largest Islamic kingdom in the islands, encompassed parts of Indonesia, Malaysia and the Philippines. The royal house of the Sultanate claimed descent from Muhammad. Around 1405, the year that the war over succession ended in the Majapahit Empire, Sufi traders introduced Islam into the Hindu-Malayan empires, and for about the next century the southern half of Luzon and the islands south of it were subject to the various Muslim sultanates of Borneo. During this period, the Japanese established a trading post at Ipari and maintained a loose sway over northern Luzon. Attacked by the Bruneian Empire. Around the year 1500, the Sultanate of Brunei under Sultan Bulkiah attacked the Kingdom of Tondo and established a city with the Malay name of Salurong on the opposite bank of Pasig River. The traditional Rajas of Tondo, the Lakangela, retained the titles and property, but the real political power came to reside in the House of Solomon, the Rajas of Manila. Attack of the Spanish conquest to doors. Filipino historians note an overlap in the history of pre-colonial Philippines and the Spanish colonial period, noting that while Magellan's arrival in 1521 marked the first arrival of European colonizers to this country, it was not until the arrival of Miguel López de Legazpi in 1565 that the Europeans had any marked impact on the lifestyle of the residents of the Philippine archipelago. National Historical Institute and National Commission for Culture and the Arts Chair Ambeth Ocampo notes, contrary to popular belief, the so-called Spanish period in Philippine history does not begin with Magellan's arrival in Cebu and his well-deserved death in the Battle of Mactan in 1521. Magellan may have planted a cross and left the Santo Niño with the wife of Humabon, but that is not a real conquista. The Spanish dominion over the islands to be known as Filipinas began only in 1565 with the arrival of Legazpi. From Cebu, Legazpi moved to other populated and, we presume, important native settlements like Panay and later Manila.